Our Sunrise Smart Start begins with breaking news this morning. A 13-year-old is in the hospital with life-threatening injuries after police say a BB gun pellet struck that child in the upper body.
This happening just after midnight on Fulton Avenue in Rochester. Officers say two kids were playing with a BB gun when it accidentally discharged. This investigation is underway.
Police also investigating breaking news at this hour. A 16-year-old shot this morning. We're told the victim here has non-life-threatening injuries and is at the hospital. Police tell us it happened just after 4 a.m. on Dewey Avenue in Rochester. There are no suspects in custody.
In other big news this morning, our weather, James, hot and humid and tracking some storms.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of dry time out there, so as we enjoy or suffer under the heat, whatever your perspective. Maybe we're getting out on the golf course this morning. The morning round is by far the best. An 8 a.m. tee time, we can sort of manage that heat. But then the rumbles of thunder may begin. Trust me, from experience, not fun to be on the golf course when there's storms around. Head to the clubhouse if you do hear thunder or see lightning off in the distance. Temperatures get to near 90 degrees. Best chance for storms between 1 and 7 p.m. We'll talk about those threats as well as the 8-day forecast at the end of the show. Mark?
James, thank you. Just a couple minutes removed from our last traffic update. No updates in terms of accidents, and that's good news for those heading out the door. 390, 490, and 590 all on time at last check. Well, developing in Rochester, a car flipping over during a police chase in the area of Bay Street and North Goodman Street. The vehicle crashing, you see it in the footage here. The driver and passenger tried to climb out of the windshield and flee. They were taken into custody. Sean Irizarry, a resident, witnessed all of this unfold, and he says it was like something out of a movie.
And I hear some screeching, and so I could hear the car accident, and I ran to the front of the driveway, and that's when I seen the car flip over into, like, right in front of the driveway.
Well, we're told the driver and passenger were treated for minor injuries. Charges are pending.
Rochester police making an arrest in a double fatal car crash from last November. 29-year-old Christopher Antonetti of Rochester charged with 2 counts of manslaughter in the second degree and 1 count of assault in the second degree. Investigators say he was driving over 90 miles per hour before a crash at the intersection of Mount Reed Boulevard and Lyle Avenue. 11-year-old Jaden DeSue and 4-year-old Javon Green Rucker were in the other car and died. An 8-year-old sibling and their mother survived.
We've got an update on that lockdown at East High School in Rochester on Tuesday. Police responding to several calls about a man with a gun at the school. The school did release a statement saying a student was struck with a weapon during the altercation outside the school building and that no shots were fired. Several different groups were fighting as school let out that day, prompting the incident.
Police in Geneva have arrested a second person in relation to a body found behind Geneva General Hospital earlier this month. 24-year-old Lucretia Verstraete was taken into custody in Canandaigua. She is charged with manslaughter and concealment of a human corpse. Police found the body of 44-year-old Keith Morlang of Waterloo on June 5th in the parking lot at the hospital. 21-year-old Kiara Scott is facing similar charges.
Happening today in Buffalo, the 18-year-old man accused of fatally shooting 10 people at a Tops supermarket is facing federal charges and is due back in court. A new 26-count criminal complaint was filed against the alleged shooter, Peyton Gendron. 13 of those charges are hate crime charges. Gendron also facing 3 counts of use and discharge of a firearm in relation to a crime of violence and 10 counts of use of a firearm to commit murder during and in relation to a crime of violence. If convicted on the final set of federal charges, Gendron could face the death penalty.
In national news, the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection is holding its 3rd public hearing today. The panel is expected to focus on former Vice President Mike Pence, who faced threats by Donald Trump supporters during the riots. The hearing comes after the panel released surveillance video of a tour led by a Republican congressman the day before the attack. Now that video is raising new questions. Turning to the latest on COVID-19, an FDA medical panel has recommended both Moderna and Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccines for children under the age of 5. Children that age are currently the only group in the U.S. that remain ineligible to get vaccinated. The CDC says more than 440 children ages 4 and under have died from COVID during the pandemic, and though rare, hospitalizations among that age group have risen during the Omicron surge.
We have to be careful that we don't become numb to the number of pediatric deaths because of the overwhelming number of older deaths.
It's unclear how much demand there is for this youngest age group. Only 29% of children under 12 have been vaccinated since they became eligible for Pfizer's shot back in November. Well, looking ahead locally to the Rochester Jazz Festival this weekend, an opportunity to give back to the community while enjoying some tunes.
So much fun. For the 14th year, the festival will hold an instrument drive for students in the Rochester City School District. Erica Cost live this morning with more on this. Erica, good morning.
Good morning. And when we think of what students need in the classroom, we often think of things like notebooks and pencils, but musical instruments might not come to mind first. And organizers of the drive tell me they're just as important. They can be expensive. That's why they're asking the community to help in this special way. Instruments in the classroom have always been in demand, says Amy Stein, executive director with Rochester Education Foundation. But on top of that,
we need things like cork grease and reeds and strings, and also supplies to help clean the instruments.
That's why the foundation partners with the Jazz Fest and M&T Bank to help relieve these expenses for families. They collect musical items for the Rochester City School District at the Jazz Fest and have been doing it for 13 years. This week, they're making a full return in person after a 2-year hiatus.
I think all opportunities to be in person are fantastic, but especially when it's an opportunity to help a child. So you get to go and you get to hear jazz and you get to participate in a fantastic community event, and you get to help somebody.
During the fest, you'll see a donation booth on Parcel 5 asking for any used playable instruments. Daniel Burns with M&T Bank says trumpets, trombones, and flutes are a few examples of what's in high demand.
You can just show up and we'll gladly take it off your hands.
Stein says Rochester has always been a musical community, and every year people continue to step up.
You know, talking to people and hearing the stories about these instruments that have been collected.
So for them to have the opportunity to learn how to play, that's not just in school, that's outside. That's something they get to keep forever.
She says they've collected over 3,500 instruments throughout the years doing this. Just look for them in the merchandise tent on Parcel Ave. They'll be there from 5 to 8 p.m. And to get a full sense of some of the items they are looking for, you can also head to rochestereducation.org. In Rochester, Erica Cost, News 8.
Erica, thank you. We should note that Drive is not accepting things like pianos, drum sets, or accordions. Let's get a look at the GRE Morning Business Report now. Bitcoin recovering Wednesday after diving to an 18-month low. The world's largest cryptocurrency dropping more than 50% in value since the beginning of the year. Now, additionally, the digital currency sector has been pummeled this week after Celsius froze withdrawals and transfers.
And automakers reporting nearly 400 crashes over a 10-month period involving vehicles with partially automated driver assist systems. Tesla included as roughly 273 of them, though the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration cautions against using the numbers alone to compare automakers.
All right, here's what some folks will be talking about at the water cooler this morning. Netflix is hosting a real-life version of Squid Game. Over 400 real players will enter with a chance to win $4.56 million. Now, unlike the show, the worst fate here is going home empty-handed, so that's the good news. The 10-episode competition will be filmed in the UK. Players competing in games featured on the show, plus some new surprises, some new additions. Yeah, you wouldn't want to enter something and face the fate that they're facing on the show, right?
But I'm sure a lot of people will be watching that because that show very popular.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. And whether or not you like the heat, that's what we've got for today. You see these numbers and you say, oh, it's going to be warm at the bus stop. Temperatures getting into the 90s this afternoon. Some of those storms that pop up later today could be strong. Focus is in the Finger Lakes south of Rochester. We've got wind. Damaging wind gusts going to be the #1 threat from those storms. And then we clear out and cool down into the 70s, 60s, and 50s by the weekend.
All right, thanks, James. Download the News 8 app if you don't have it. All right, and thanks for watching News 8 at Sunrise.
Our next update in 30 minutes. CBS Mornings is up next. Have a great day.